Hey everybody, Edo here, and I am excited today because I have Martyn Poole on the line. Say hello, Martyn.
Hello.
And Martyn is somebody who I met a few years ago, or online met, e-introduction, whatever, around the Herbaceous campaign, because Martyn, you were kicking off, or coming up with this idea, or trying to do board game exposure. Now, it's something that I've spoken about it in a few videos, but just to set the groundwork for the conversation, what is board game exposure? Why did you start it? How did you get into it? What's it about?
Well, I was very early on in the board game playing and reviewing for an online blog, and I was getting turned down left, right, and centre for the next hotness. You know, I was writing emails showing people how many hits my blogs were getting, but they were still saying no. And the main reason being, the majority of the big games that I wanted to try were coming from the US, and the cost of shipping was a big factor in that. You know, that was one of the reasons that I think I paid some of the shipping when you sent Herbaceous over, because the cost of the game was negligible compared to the amount of shipping. So I had this idea of getting more than one reviewer, and I first trialled that game with Peter Vaughan when he was doing Rise of the Tribes.
Sure.
So I reached out. He sent me a review copy. I reached out to a few other UK-based reviewers, and I was like, "Hey, I've got this game. It's awesome. I'll pay the shipping to you. Do you want to review it?" And before long, 4 or 5 people had it. And when Peter turned around and said that I was one of the best copies that he sent out, and it was worthwhile sending it to the UK, that's when I realised I was onto something, and that's where the idea was born. You know, well, if I can do this for a prototype for a Kickstarter and get so much exposure for it, then maybe I can do it for retail games, for other Kickstarters, and that's where the idea come about.
And just to talk about it from my perspective, a publisher perspective, you know, it really is the case where you, especially in the Kickstarter prototype land, but even for review copies, you have the game. If it's a prototype, you only have a limited number of them. Yeah. You might even want to reship it afterwards, right? You're trying to, if you only have 2 or 3 prototypes, you might be trying to get 2 reviews out of each one. And the idea of sending it overseas is risky in the first place. It's usually because you're going to want to do priority, you're going to want to do with insurance and tracking and all that. It's going to cost you 30, 40, 50 bucks more, depending on the size of the game. And then again, if you want to ship it away, and then it just takes longer on a tight schedule, shipping it, you know, to you know, California to Nevada is way less than from California to, you know, the UK or international. And so, you know, that's a real part of it. And even when you're looking at a consumer, you know, like a retail product, unless you have really strong international distribution and localized copies, you're still sort of like, well, I can get the reviews I need in the States, and I don't really have a big market out there, or I don't have the distribution out there, so it's not as interesting. Now, when somebody says, well, if you just send one, we'll do the legwork work to get 3, 4, 5, 6 reviews from other people, well, then suddenly that equation starts changing. You're like, well, maybe that is a good idea. And that's, I think, I didn't remember or not, but probably with Herbaceous, a common thing I would have said, because it's not uncommon. You know, if an international reviewer comes up to me and says, hey, I want to look at it, I'd be like, well, you know, I don't maybe have, but if you'll pay the shipping, I'll send you one, right? The cost of the game isn't really, it's the shipping. And a lot of times they say no, right? Like a lot of times they're just looking for that free copy, and they don't want to spend the 30 bucks to get it, or the 20 bucks to get it.
Yeah, it's, you know, I've had people that have said to me before, well, if you pay the shipping or some of the shipping, we'll send the game out. And then as somebody that didn't want just a free copy of a game, I wanted to build a brand, I wanted to build myself in the industry, I'd always say yes, even if it wasn't necessarily a game that I knew would stay on my shelf.
Sure.
And then sometimes people turn around and go, well, actually, no, don't pay the shipping. And they're just saying that just to try and weed out the people that are after a free copy. Because unfortunately, there are people out there that do try that with YouTube and everything. Everybody can be a reviewer at the end of the day.
Yeah, sure. Certainly. And I think you have different publishers who are more or less willing to go with less known people and that kind of thing. So, but to get back on on track, so you sort of say, I'm going to do this, you create a Facebook group, and you're reaching out, and you sort of now have, or you built I don't know what the right expression is, but a bullpen of reviewers, right? A number of people who are interested in the program. You know, and there's more stuff you've been doing, but just to stay on board game exposure, like, just out of curiosity, I mean, how many now that it's up and running, people are aware of it, you've had some bigger name people using your service. How many games are you getting in a month that you're passing around, would you say?
Well, we've just updated our spreadsheet. We've got a spreadsheet, and I'd say easily the last year we've got over 150 games easily. Wow. And we have been struggling at times, but knowing and again wanting to be somebody, and the other people as well that are part of it, we're all one big team. People that want to be in the industry for the long term, not short term, we sort of schedule. So if it's a Kickstarter game, that'll always take first poll, first spot. Everybody will have that before a retail game. So we've never let anybody down, touch wood, and we hope to go, to continue doing that, because we want to be here long term. I know, I'll bet my house on it that it's a service that as soon as someone hears about it, they want to use it and they want to ask questions. Sure. We've had to turn people down. I get multiple inboxes on Facebook every day, and they're, hey, will you review my game? And then you ask them, oh, can you tell me about your game? And they go, yes, it's a deck builder. And that's all you get. And you're just like, well, if you can't be excited about your own game, then we can't be excited about it either. So unfortunately, we can't. But we're more than willing to share a game as long as the Kickstarter page is done good and the game looks like it's got some substance to it. We will share it about for them to try and help them, but we can't take every game on.
Sure. And just for my information, you guys are still effectively free. That is to say, you're not a paid preview review service, correct?
We will never charge. We charge for our banner on the Kickstarter.
Sure.
But that's it. That's completely separate. It's two different services. And to try and get away from the negativity of paid reviews, I've even put myself in charge of advertising and someone else in charge of accepting the reviews. So it's two completely separate people. So there's no bias on there whatsoever.
Cool. All right. And so you've built this up. And then, I've been watching, and it's nice, the attitude and the approach and everything about it, I think, is wonderful. So certainly I was, anytime I've used it, and I don't know if I have it, but you should make sure after this email that you're on my, not that it's some expansive list, but my distribution for my retail games as they come out. But then suddenly you reach out to me and you're talking to me about Robin Hood and the Merry Men, and you're like, hey, I got this thing going on, you interested? And I remember looking at it and I was like, oh, that's the Final Frontier guys, right? Like, it's Cavern Tavern and Rise to Nobility. I'm like, so far they've been sending me their stuff, I think they'll send it to me, because at first I didn't realize that was a game that you had designed or co-designed with them. I thought it was a review. I wasn't. It was just weird. Like, I didn't understand. And so, how did you then move into the design side of things?
Well, I reviewed Cavern Tavern. I reached out about Rise to Nobility, and we did an interview. Me and Tony from Final Frontier. We did an interview, and we sort of similar to me and you. The first few emails are sort of sketchy, and it's like, oh, why is this guy asking for a free game, so to speak, to review? I don't know him, even though there's links there. They had a campaign running, so they were very busy. And after about 2 to 3 weeks, we'd been speaking every day and refining the Q&A that I did with them, because the guys are actually Macedonian, so English isn't their first language. Sure. So we were refining it and getting it ready. And I noticed a similarity between sort of Rise to Nobility and the idea that I had, even though my original idea was a lot more combat heavy. And it come from my childhood, growing up loving Robin Hood. I really wanted a game that was Robin Hood based. The only one that I'd played was Sheriff of Nottingham. Sure. But to me, that isn't a Robin Hood game. You don't do actions in the game that make you feel part of that story.
Yeah, so that's very much a Sheriff of Nottingham game.
Yeah, exactly. So I literally sent an A4 page of brief ideas over to Tony, and that was the first sort of sketch of ideas that I had down. I had others, but I didn't really know much about the industry, so I didn't know how cutthroat it was or how friendly it was. So this was my idea. I wanted to keep hold of it. So I sent him a rough idea, and he went, "Oh, there's a game in here." And throughout the campaign of Rise to Nobility, me and Tony spoke every single day, and we were bouncing ideas off. Didn't have a contract, didn't know whether they were going to take the game on, didn't have anything. As far as I was concerned, they could have used me to,
Sure.
they didn't know a lot about Robin Hood. They were just using me to get how the thematics would work in the turn order that we had. And as soon as it was over, he introduced me to Voican, who is the co-owner of Final Frontier. I think it's owned by 4 people. And a contract was offered within 2 weeks, and they were like, right, we're going to take this game to Kickstarter November time this year. And I was like, right, okay, brilliant. And then they decided to go to Essen. They took me with them. So it's been delayed now until January, February time next year. But it's been an absolute whirlwind that, somebody in any other industry that you're in, if you give somebody your idea and they see it as a way of making money, they're off with that idea. To me, it opened up my eyes to how much I wanted to be in this industry. To have my first game come into Kickstarter that I've co-designed with them, and everything else with Board Game Exposure. I've never had a day where I think I don't want to be part of this industry. Every day's increased that want and need.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, certainly I think having worked in a lot of other industries, but in video games as a comparison point, I think there's something inherent to the social structure of board gaming that it attracts and engages people that sort of can handle and enjoy being in groups and socializing, right? Like there's a certain bit of it that sort of requires, not quite, but like that kind of energy and attitude to really engage and be a part of the community. And I think it really is quite a special, and still, even though it's rapidly growing and changing, still very close-knit. Through your story and narrative, I guess is a better word than story, I wanted to make a couple points, because I think, a lot of people have initiative, but they get caught up. And I think what clearly has happened is, right, there's a certain type of sort of honest, engaging initiative where you're looking to do something, you're talking to people, you're not being rude or nasty, or, oh, you didn't give me you're just, building up a communication and relationship, and over time it pays off, right? Over time, when you're reaching out to different publishers and you're building up your board game exposure, channel and service, over time you meet people, engage with them, and you find the person that's willing to take that risk, right? Or in the case of
exactly.
the board game side, by helping on the QA, you're building that relationship to then show your design or engage with them on a game, right?
Yeah, 100%. Another example of that was before you mentioned Board Game Exposure on your first video that you mentioned us on. I'd already reached out to Jamie Stegmaier, who said, unfortunately, it's costly to send games over to the UK, so I won't be using you. 2 days after your video, I had another email saying, oh, I've realised how it actually works. That sounds like a great idea. Can I use you? Now, for me, I wouldn't say I was starstruck, because I'm the sort of person that sees everybody just as a person.
Sure.
I don't. That's just the way I am. I'm from a trade background, so I was a bit like, oh, hold on, I've got this person that everyone sees as an industry great, and he is a great guy, and he does give a lot of advice to people, but he's actually realised that I am onto a good thing, and to receive that email, I sent it to the other guys, and they were like, wow, we're onto something good. And I think it made them realise, actually, I'm glad to be part of this.
Yeah, well, that's awesome, man. And Jamie, I actually was on the phone with him just a few days ago. Super helpful and available dude. And I think to some degree that, some of these videos more people watch than others, and some are more interesting than others, I presume. But, it's always about trying to, identify and look at different things that are going on in the industry. And so to move from Board Game Exposure, which again is, I think, a really rock solid service you guys are offering, and awesome. We should talk about more things that are happening for me in 2018 on Pencil First Games. So let's set that aside. And there's also Robin Hood and Merry Men. Interestingly enough, I mean, I'm excited about it. I can't wait to see how that Kickstarter is coming together and everything's pulling together. But I'm more interested in talking to you a little bit about what you're doing next because it sounds really interesting, and I actually don't know much about it because I
Okay.
had a little preview chat with you before, and then I was like, oh. So
Yeah.
you've decided to start, you can give the baseline, but this board game PR, what is this service? What are you doing? What's your next play?
Well, board game exposure was always the first idea that I had, and rather than go in completely and fail, I'd rather build it slowly. So I noticed that there's a hell of a lot of games on Kickstarter that simply not everybody can go to a convention, not everybody can go to every convention. Not only that, you've got some great people out there that make some great games but haven't got the know-how on marketing or artwork, and then vice versa. They've got all the knowledge of marketing and artwork, but they don't know how to make a great game. So I wanted to think of a service that could bring that together. Now, there was an announcement about a week ago where Thundergriff Games, the guys behind Tao Long, Overseers, and Dead Man's Doubloons, they've offered me a full-time job. What hasn't been announced, and I'll give you the the first on this, is it's actually a partnership between myself, Final Frontier, and Thundergriff Games, and we're doing a dedicated board game PR service which I will be running. And basically, it's a full dedicated service for the board game industry. So play testing, we can do play testing, we can sort that, artwork, localization, worldwide distribution, everything that you need to get from an idea right through to a shop's shelf so it can be sold. We have built up our contacts. I've been in the industry now probably only a year. Thundergriff Games probably a year and a half, and Final Frontier 2 years. Final Frontier's last sort of job that they had was social marketing. Now, if you had a look at how successful Rise to Nobility was, and I'm not allowed to tell you, but if I could tell you how much marketing money they actually spent and budget, it was next to nothing when it was compared to some other projects.
Sure.
They've got some really, really neat ideas that they're going to implement, and I think all three of us together can offer a service that will be €100 a month, that will give you play testing, give you reviews, give you 1 hour talks with people that have had successful campaigns. So that's for the sort of Kickstarter newbies, the ones that need advice.
So let me just, I'm trying to wrap my head around the service for a second, because again, I'm learning this all for the first time, and perhaps since this video doesn't post immediately, that news may come out first, but I appreciate you being so candid. I mean, when I think PR, right, I think about press releases and marketing and getting the word out. Though, despite that, it sounds like what you're saying is more of a stem to stern, cradle to grave service that provides a whole bunch of different services along the way through the development cycle. Now, is it, when you talk about playtesting, I get, and reaching out to reviewers, I get, but when you talk about things like manufacturing or distribution, I mean, is it that you're saying what you're going to do as an organization is connect people together with partners, or are you saying you're going to actually manage that project? How hands-on, how hands-off is it?
We can do project management, so it's a completely tailored service. So, for instance, if we were to reach out to you and say, hey, yeah, we can do this, this, and this, but you already know how to do it, then there's no point us reaching out to you. But I think everybody that's involved in the industry at any level, whether it's you, whether it's a first timer, whether it's somebody that has been in the industry for 10 years, there is some element that they would like to take away and think, actually, that takes a lot of my time up, and rather than do that, I would rather be doing this instead and developing more games. So, for example, you were right when you said PR is reviews and marketing. We're going to have my own review network that I've built up with Board Game Exposure, and we're actually going to integrate it with this new service. So if you wanted reviews and you wanted demographics and you wanted dedicated feedback to your own inbox, then I can do that. You just tell me what your game is, how many reviews you want, and I can sort all that out for you. And then it, bam, straight into your inbox, the links to the reviews, etc.
Cool. I mean, Yeah, that's the interesting part, right? Where it'll be interesting to see how you turn around and you begin to market it and position it as a service, because the needs and wants, the organizations that want or need those different features or services are sort of at different stages. In terms of what you described, just speaking from a Pencil First Games perspective, the PR piece is actually fairly interesting to me. The one which is presumably running around and coordinating reviews, running around and coordinating press releases. And I mean, those are services that I've used in other industries and have been very helpful. And there hasn't really been a good example in board games, because I think there's a bunch of feeders, sort of explode, just people who are just telling everyone and spamming. But really, when you think of a PR service, you're thinking of an organization that knows you as a client, is engaged, and doing it in the best way to support your brand, which means not over flooding, not over posting, thinking about where it gets. So that kind of effort and energy, I think, is very timely and needed. I'm curious to see, and I'll just see it as you go, how you're going to sort of have those services as well as have these other sort of development and product management services.
Yeah, it should all fit hand in hand. At the end of the day, I think we're going to be launching in January. So it's going to be a new year and it's going to be a new challenge. And getting what made it so difficult was the fact that the big uproar about paid reviews and unpaid reviews, and then how can we offer this service when we're going to be paid in terms of offering this service, and I know a review is only going to be a small part of it, but is that going to cause a problem? So I came up with the idea of getting a list of reviewers together, a list of media contacts together, creating a website, and then rewarding them somehow. So the ones that not necessarily have got the biggest following, but the ones that review on time in terms of the time scale that we give them, that have the content updated on the day that you guys need it, giving them a sort of point system, so then they can earn vouchers or money towards the game that they actually want. So then us as a PR service can say, yeah, okay, we'll get you this game. So we're rewarding the reviewers as well, because I think, and I might be saying this because I'm a reviewer and you might or might not agree with me, but I think sometimes we are taken for granted. I think, they send us a game, we spend X amount of time, I do a minimum of 3 to 4 playthroughs at 2 different play accounts. I review that game. I might not enjoy the game, but I still talk about the good points of the game.
Sure.
And then it's forgotten about, and they've done a review. It might be on the Kickstarter page or it might be on the internet for people to see, but you very rarely get more than one thanks. And the first thanks that you get is when you send them the link. After that, you don't get by the way, your review was great 6 months down the line, even though it might have taken you 2 or 3 weeks to do that.
Sure.
So we wanted a sort of way to reward the reviewers.
Yeah, it's an interesting idea. Have you seen my video where I talk with Matt Holden from IGA, Indie Game? They do a number with their Minion approach, and I think Gamers Guild is doing a Minion approach. There are a number of these services that are a little bit more playtest, sort of get into stores, a little bit more field marketing focused than necessarily social media marketing focused, that have some of those different type of incentive programs. Yeah, I don't know how far it does or doesn't fit into the whole reviewed and paid content and all that. I mean, I think at the end of the day, right, the baseline is if it's compensated, you just want to have clear indication of such, and then it becomes sponsored or whatever, and then it's really not an issue because you're up front. It's when it's sponsored or otherwise, and it's not clear to the end user that that's the case. Those are the challenges. But that's a whole other topic for another time.
Yes, definitely.
Okay, so board game exposure, thing as a service is going well, and on the board game exposure side, they can reach out to you and find out about their games. And one thing that you mentioned, which I'll reiterate, if you haven't seen my review, you've probably on how to get a review. It just talks about this idea that you mentioned earlier, which is, hey, if you want a reviewer to review your game, as a free service type reviewer, you know, tell them, you know, don't do a form letter, like address it to them, recognize something they've done, you know, like provide photos and the rules and things that demonstrate that it's a game worth you know, reviewing. I mean, I do about the same thing you do, which is to say, if somebody sends me information, it's a no-go unless you tell me when the Kickstarter is, when you can get it to me, pictures and a rule book. I just don't. I don't care. If you send me that, then I look at it and I decide, hey, you know, is this something I'm sort of interested in? Not, and then I'll, you know, let you know from there. But I think that's sort of a bare minimum that you need to have in place.
Yeah, definitely. They have to put in as much effort as you are. If you have to spend effort finding out if you want to review their game, then that's effort that you could put into the actual review. So that's the way I look at it anyway.
Yeah, totally. Cool. Well, okay. And so that's board game exposure. And then Robin Hood and the Merry Men, that is tentatively January, February, but presumably as the lead up starts, you're going to start promoting it and making lots of noise, and we'll see it everywhere. I will note to the world who listens and cares, don't expect January, February, March to be light. I'm going to venture to say there's probably as many games coming out Q1 as there was Q2 or Q3 this year.
Yeah.
So
I was at PAX last week, the week before, and I was getting worried. I was going around the booths, and I was like, so when's this game coming to Kickstarter? And I think I counted 17 games just from PAX.
Yeah, no. It's everyone sort of feels like they're skipping the storm by pushing from September to October, but since it's just getting more and more crowded, it doesn't matter. The longer you wait, the more crowded it's going to get, no matter what month you go. So it's going to be a challenging scene on Kickstarter and beyond. And then you have this new service, which may or may be announced here. If not, you heard it, but he said it first here, but this was recorded and reposted. But that is probably going to sort of manifest in January. You're saying it's something, you know, is going to have a website. I mean, how that with all the details and stuff.
The website's being built now. The play testing that I mentioned is going to be a separate website for the simple fact that there's going to be a lot of information that's going to need to be held on that website. So it's going to be part of the BGPR, but it's going to be a separate website. And that should go live around about the same time, to be honest. We're quite excited about that because, again, I'll probably get in trouble for saying this, but it's not going to require a physical copy of the game to be play tested. If I'll say that, and then that's pretty much all I can say. But it's using online resources to play test it.
Cool. Well, yeah, there are a number of those available now. That really does make a difference when you're trying to play test. And play test in volume. It does take a little bit of a setup, but perhaps that's something you're signing up for. Yeah, I mean, don't tell me anything's going to get you in trouble, man. It's not a good start.
They're fine.
But yeah, I mean, so that sounds like you're a busy and exciting 2018 coming along. Was there anything else interesting or novel happening?
Well, yeah, about 2 weeks ago, I actually left my full-time job. So now I'm in the industry. Well,
you were in the industry before. I think people feel like it only counts if you're full-time, and most people aren't. So, but that's exciting. How's that transition been for you?
It's been difficult. It's good that I can wake up. I've actually got a 3-year-old and a 10-year-old, so I can wake up and, you know, do 8 hours a day, 4 hours here and 4 hours there. Whereas before, you know, what it's like working for a company, you get up and you have to work this time and this time. So it's difficult. The first couple of days were difficult, trying to get yourself motivated to know what you have to do. Then I was whisked away off to PAX, which was a strange convention. I've only ever been to UK Games Expo, Essen, and PAX was my third ever convention, and it was strange, the feeling opening on Thursday morning, Friday morning. It wasn't a buyer's con. There wasn't a lot of people running around to get the latest hotness and having bags and pushing people out the way like it was at Essen. But everyone that I spoke to had either never been to a con before, or never played a board game before. Probably 60 to 70% of people that were there to just play a game and just see what the fuss was about. And I think if they did a little bit more local marketing, it would have been a lot busier, but it was really, really successful, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really, I mean, not that, you know, you go to whatever conventions you go and whatever you order you go, but like going to PAX Unplugged it's not really representative of U.S. conventions because it's sort of this hybrid new first time that's, you know, the PAX audience, which is this video, you know, more of a gamer, video game style audience and comic audience, and then moving over to the Unplugged board game scene and seeing the overlap. So that was everyone's first PAX Unplugged, right? So, you know, as it grows, I'm sure it'll continue to develop, and as you grow, I suspect you'll get to see what Gen Con's like or what some of the other conventions are like. Though, from what I understand, not having been at Essen, but both Essen and UK, those lean towards being buyer cons, as you mentioned. And in the States, at least, there's more of an emphasis on playing and buying, but there's more dedicated play time and expectations that you're going to these conventions to, and this isn't universally true, but generally true, going to the conventions to meet people and play and buy, as opposed to just buy. But awesome. And so, yeah, it's been. I didn't actually come in with a you know, set of discussion points because I think you've been doing these interesting sort of unique things, and I'm very curious. We should do once board game PR is sort of up and running, and you've dealt with the sort of bumps in the road and think, you know, just as you're figuring it all out, maybe March or April. We should have another one, and you can go into more details on how that's going and what the service is and how it's developing.
Yeah, definitely. I think everything that I've done, you say it's being unique, I think it comes down to one thing or maybe two things, and that's being determined and building an audience. And I think the way that you build an audience is important. You know, the group that I've got here, Board Game Exposure, I think it's just got 1,800 members. But before I turned it from a secret group to a group that anybody could join, I had 800 members in there, so it's got the foundation of 800 people that want to be there for a reason.
Sure.
And I know you're in a lot of groups that I'm in as well, and there's a lot of industry groups out there that remain secret. And you see that as soon as you comment in one of them, bang, your notifications on Facebook go crazy because the people want to be there to learn and they want to be there. And I was dead set against doing competitions to start off with, because competitions bring people that just want free stuff, not necessarily want to contribute. And I think that's the biggest thing going forward. You said about Kickstarter being absolutely crammed full of games. I think it's everyone for the past year has been reading blogs and reading posts about, hey, you should make your Kickstarter page look like this and it'll help you fund. And now suddenly every Kickstarter page looks fantastic. It's very rare to see a bad looking Kickstarter page. When you pick on somebody's, oh, what's in your box is too far down the page, you know that actually everyone's Kickstarter page is pretty good quality. Yeah. It's just a bit of shifting around here and there.
Sure.
Every game is almost complete now. There's not many games that are going to Kickstarter that, oh, you will get this in 12 months time because we need 6 months more refining it. Oh yeah, have on me, you know, we'll get a gamble on you. You don't get that anymore. I think it's going to come down to the marketing and coming down to
and the audience and bringing people to it. Yeah, it's absolutely crowded with high quality content. I completely agree.
Yes, 100%.
All right, man. Well, I mean, and not to be dire, because there's still opportunities, and you see people squeezing through the cracks all the time. But it certainly pays or is valuable to know what you're up against.
Definitely.
As you go. But so, thanks for your time and your service and trying to bring reviews out and international reviews and all that stuff. And certainly anyone watching, please do check out Board Game Exposure if you're doing a Kickstarter. I think it is a good service, and I'm very curious about the game and the other one, but we'll get there when we get there. But subscribe, share all that good stuff. Most importantly, play some great games. Thanks for being on, Martyn.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.